What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and we are going to be doing a wrap-up of the knockout rounds in the Overwatch League playoffs today. So we're going to talk the matches from Friday. We had a lot of crazy stuff going on. And after we're done talking about the knockout matches, we're going to break down the next couple of days of matches. Well, at least Saturday, where we have all the set stuff. We're going to do some predictions on those. Hopefully they go better than a couple of the ones that we had already. But we'll dive into that in a minute. Before we do that, I'd like to thank everybody out there on YouTube for all the views, all of the likes, subscribes, all the stuff you guys have been doing, all the support. Been greatly appreciated. Say to everybody out there in podcast land, thank you very much. All right. So the playoffs have started. And let's talk about the first couple of matches that we had. So, going in, we broke down what we thought the meta was going to be and all that. Let's talk about that. First, it's all over the place, first of all. We're seeing a lot of Roadhog, a lot of Zarya, and then some teams are trying some different stuff that works, some of it doesn't, and we knew we were going to see some of this stuff. We thought we'd have some upsets. I thought they would be further on down the line, but let's talk about the first match to kick off the 2020 playoffs in the Overwatch League. A couple of minutes. Let's talk about Boston absolutely owning the Houston Outlaws. So, once again, with Houston, I'm sorry, Houston fans, but I don't know what's in the water, but you failed again. And this time, I don't understand what some of the comps were. And I think they lost in spawn, not necessarily on... Well, they also lost on the field, so to speak. But we knew what some of the stuff that's strong in this... Everybody plays the game. You know that Roadhog's strong. You know that hit scans have free reign without shields, because shields just get absolutely destroyed. All the things. And what do? They run Pharah. Yes, on certain maps, Pharah is fantastic. But they insta-lock Pharah on all these man, and I knew my pick and the rest of the Overwatch League community. Oh, and congrats to you, 5.2% that picked Boston in the $100,000 bracket. You're rock stars. But I knew it was bad because I know that this team has a track record of not switching up comps and changing on the fly. There are a lot of other teams that are like that in the league that are higher up than they are, but it's just come to bite them in the ass since season 1. And they're always like this one step off of everybody else. And here we are. They're playing Boston, the worst team in the league, and they come out on Pharah. And Boston, to their credit, played really well. This meta, this current iteration meta going into the playoffs worked into their favor. I don't want to really call it a solid meta yet, but they played this out very, very well. They decided to go with Roadhog, and they ran some Orisa and some other things going on with that, different comps, and they had Jerry playing hit scan, and Houston still runs the Pharah into it. I just don't understand why, but they did. And, it might have worked in scrims. It could have been viable, but at a certain point when stuff starts to go awry, you think at some point you're going to go, you know what, let's switch off. But they kind of did a little bit, but I don't know. It was not good. And props to Boston for beating them. They just came out, they played what was strong against Houston. Houston didn't adapt properly, and they suffered for it and lost. Now, the other match, we had Houston taking on Vancouver. I got this one right. Washington just came out and played the Hog Zarya and just really took it to the Vancouver Titans. Decay was unbelievable on the Zarya, and they just showed that they're here, and guys showed up that hadn't showed up since they've been on this team. Janu and Stitch, they came in, they showed that they're still at a high level players, that they're championship level players. In fact, like they were last year. They came out and they took it to Vancouver. There really isn't much to say about this other than Washington absolutely dominated them. Where, Shockwave did some stuff. They had a couple of decent pushes here and there, but Washington was in control of this match the whole way through. Decay obviously has proved that he's a great player in the past. He did really well, honestly, on Zarya last year for the most part, for the Gladiators, when he played her. But he came out, destroyed them. He had just his KDA, and like they had the whole sneaker contest thing. He should win the sneaker contest KDA thing, because there was at one point where he was at, I think he had 36 eliminations, average 10 to 1.08 deaths. That's nuts. Not to mention the fact that his average energy on Zarya was over 45 or 50%. That's just crazy stuff. And that's, it's in a 3-map match, but still, he just absolutely dominated them on Zarya. Props to Washington for coming out and just playing guys on heroes that they're good at, because you have Arc and Aim God playing their really good heroes. Arc on Mercy, you got Aim God on Anna. It just works out really, really well for them. And you had Stitch going off a little bit. We'll talk about more later, but they just took it to Vancouver. Now, let's go over to APAC for the one match we've had there. A lot of you guys are going to be seeing this on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, while where the second round's going on in APAC. Chengdu, in this match, they did what they do. They confused the crap out of London. London really had no answers. They did take a map, but they ran a bunch of different comps. Obviously, Aming on ball, and they did a lot of different stuff. Jinmu was going off. And let's talk about Yevitol as the best Mercy in the league. His reses in some of these spots were absolutely insane to think about trying, and he pulled them off. It's like they didn't even care that he was going in there sometimes. But Chengdu did a lot in this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the next round. They have New York coming up next. That's going to be a rough one. Chengdu did what we thought they were going to do, and they took care of business against London. London is still just not great. They did some things, but it really wasn't enough to take care of business against Chengdu. Chengdu had their number. They just Chengdu'd the win, and we have an elimination coming in. Apparently, Aming's still on the point. And speaking of that, one of the worst C9s I've ever seen. The organization that I was named for. So, I don't know if you guys watched the match, but there was a point on King's Row, the final point, where Chengdu's pushing in, almost to have the cart in all the way to get the third point. Aming is on the cart. There's the fight. There's the aftermath of a fight. There's a couple guys left for London, and you think London's going to win this, or at least stop it for a moment. Aming gets slept. Left on the cart, it's still rolling, and nobody jumps on the cart to stop it for London. Literally, a sleeping ball took the point. So, that's just things like that. Right now with London, they have a future. Right now, not so great. That was not the best showing, and we kind of knew that was going to happen, because Chengdu, for as much flack as I give them, they can beat teams like London. They can beat teams in the middle range, and they can surprise good teams. So, that's a wrap-up of Thursday and Friday morning. All right, let's move on to the matches that were on Friday after the Chengdu Hunters won. We're going to go back to NA, and these are the matches that we had the pick show for, where teams, they do the back and forth. The teams come in and pick who they're going to play. So, we had the Gladiators taking the Toronto Defiant, the Atlanta Reign taking the Boston Uprising, and the Dallas Fuel taking the Washington Justice. Well, not taking them, they got dropped in their lap. The Valiant had a close match against Toronto. Toronto showed up better than I thought they were going to. The Gladiators eventually won this match. They looked a little shaky. Toronto looked, I would say, at points in this game, a lot better than the Gladiators did, which really makes me feel a little uncomfortable about how the Gladiators are going to go moving on. I had them as kind of a dark horse to do some damage. I don't know how that's going to work out right now. They played a little weird against Toronto. Toronto did, at times, and very well could have won this match. But the Gladiators clutched up at the end, which they normally don't do, and they won this match. There were some looks that were kind of weird, but, they came out, they did what they needed to do, and their big players came in and made big plays. And that's what you want in this situation. You had big plays from Birdring, Space. You had guys like Big Goose and Chaz doing some things. They did what they needed to do. Now, the next match, even though it was a 3-1 for Atlanta, the Boston Uprising showed up. And I think Atlanta was not ready for that. I mean, yeah, they watched the match from the night before where Boston really did well. But my hat's off to Boston for actually, they could have quit. And a lot of us, including me, thought they were kind of boomed and done. But they came into this match and they showed up and they gave Atlanta a run for their money. Atlanta just ended up winning in the end. They had the guys, they made the big plays when they needed to make them. And they take this match 3-1 from Boston. But Boston has nothing to be ashamed of in these last two games. They did really well. Houston is Houston, and they do what they do. People say New York choke in pressure situations. If you poke the Houston Outlaws, they choke. Enough about Houston, but Boston, instead of rolling over, they showed up. They played really well, and good for those guys. They did really well. They showed up, and Atlanta looked okay. They thrive on doing different stuff and this and that, and they did that in this match. And I don't know if they were memeing or they were trying different things because it was Boston to see what worked and what didn't. But they came out on top. Final match on Friday, we had Washington demolishing Dallas. Once again, Decay and Janu just were too much for Dallas. Dallas had moments where they could have won maps, but also Stitch also came in and on the Ash and was just nuts. They just took over this match for early on and just would not let Dallas breathe. Dallas had their like I said, Dallas had their moments where they could have won things, but Washington right now is frightening. They're riding on the back of Decay, but it's not like a big hard carry. Yeah, he's carrying them a little bit, but some of the other guys that are big players, they were on championship teams. They're reinvigorated with this guy there. Arc, Aim God, Stitch, Janu. These guys are all playing great. And I would not want to face them. We'll get into who's facing them. But even if they don't get a win, they're into the double elimination, which I would be afraid to have to face them with my life on the line down in that bottom if they lose. Which, I mean, what we're going to get into the matches coming up here. They destroyed Dallas. Dallas just at times looked good, but much like they've been all year, ultimately in the end they don't get the W, which is the big thing with this team. They play well enough at times, but there's always a moment where they can't finish. And I thought Dallas was going to beat them, but hey, Washington, I didn't know what to expect going into these things. I just wanted to make predictions and have fun with it. They're kind of on the level, minus Boston beating Houston. I wish I flip-flopped the two teams around, but, I'm not that smart. So, or I just have faith in Houston for some unknown reason. But let's dive into who the teams picked in the first round of the double elimination tournament. We're jumping to APAC first. New York picked Chengdu, and Hangzhou picked Seoul, and we're going to do picks on this too as well, guys. So, in these two matches, the first match, I'm going to go with the New York Excelsior, just because I think they're a better team, obviously. And I think on the whole, New York has kind of a drive going on right now. I think they're poised, they're ready, at least to beat Chengdu. I don't know where they're going to go as far as after that, but I think they could beat Chengdu. But I'm going to throw this in there. I would not be surprised if Chengdu did wacky shit and won, because they're that team. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon quite yet. I'm watching it come down the street a little bit before I decide to hop on. I'm going to go with New York in this one. Now, the next match, we have Hangzhou got stuck with Seoul. Because there's only 4 teams involved in this part. This match is the 2 teams that should have been, that could still resurrect something. I don't know who to go with in this. I want Seoul to win this match. There's just something, I feel something. I feel a Prophet carry coming on here, because he's my boy, and he's got to do something. And in a playoff situation, give me Prophet and Gesture right now, but Hangzhou's really good. I think there are keys to this match is obviously neutralizing Prophet and taking advantage of Gushui's monkey play. But if you're not going to play monkey, I would run maybe Sasin and QOQ and do a Hog Zarya thing. I don't know what's going to happen in APAC, because you really can't base anything off of what Chengdu did. And certainly not London, because they were running a rush comp for some of the time and just doing other stuff, just trying to figure out what Chengdu's doing. So I don't really know what they're going to run. I'm just spitballing here as to what I would like to see Hangzhou do. At Seoul, I want them to do what they're good at, which is put Prophet on a carry hero like Tracer. Maybe if you need to, put him on Ashe with the damage boost. Run Fitz on Sombra. And however you work the rest of it is up to you. I would like to see some Hog in there, but they might not. You might get Ball. You might get who knows. But what I'm trying to get at is Seoul needs to run picks that make sense, and that there's potential for Prophet to do Prophet things, because that's the only way they win. Well, and they lose, but get some of your guys on heroes that they're really good at, really proficient at, like Gesture and Badosin, and just go from there. Now, let's move on to NA. Oh, by the way, that was a pick for Seoul. Let's move on to NA. All right, the first match we have, the Philadelphia Fusion took the Los Angeles Gladiators. I obviously like the Fusion in this. I think Gladiators can give them a fight. They've given them a fight before. But the one thing that scares me is the way that the Gladiators kind of were... They didn't impress me today, let's put it that way. They were lucky to get out alive against Toronto. Philadelphia can run any of these metas with any of these players that they have. They can run Zarya Roadhog. They can run a Winston dive comp. They can run all kinds of stuff with this roster, and I just think they're going to beat them, and I think that there's really not a question to that. I mean, yeah, the Gladiators could give them a fight. It is a weird situation where you got meta. When the meta's not solid, it's hard to figure out who's going to do what. But in my mind, Philadelphia's the way better team anyway, and I see them beating the Gladiators in this one. Now, the next pick was... It's not the next match in sequence, but the Washington Justice got picked by the San Francisco Shock, which really surprised me. I thought they would have picked Atlanta just because I think they just match up so much better against Atlanta. I don't think they're afraid of them, but I think that sometimes, and they've done this in the past, where they want to get rid of the better team, quote unquote, a team that's gaining a little bit of momentum. They just want to put them in their place, knock them down, and just move on and not have to deal with them maybe until later, especially in a double elimination. They might not have to deal with them until the concluding match to get into the grand finals. So I'm picking San Francisco. Much like Philadelphia, they can run anything they want to run. They can do all kinds of stuff. I am a little interested to see how they run their tank line, though. But they'll figure something out. Smurf is really adept at a bunch of different heroes, and you also have Choi Yobin that can play anything you want him to play at a high level. And then you have Super in there for other stuff, in case you need, I don't know, maybe he's going to bust out a Roadhog or something. Who knows what Super's going to do. But even if you're going to try and run rush into them when they're playing the Zarya Roadhog, which is kind of what it seems like people are trying to do, San Francisco can do that because they actually have the players that are capable, unlike Dallas and Vancouver, to counter that stuff. But Decay's a monster. It's going to be hard, but I think San Francisco is going to take them. Now, the final match that got picked was Atlanta got picked by Paris. And as a Mayhem fan, I was kind of hoping that they would pick the Valiant, but I knew they wouldn't because the Valiant are weird and they're hard. And they give us trouble. And I think also, You also got to look at the teams picking teams that, okay, we can handle them, but you know what? The Mayhem have trouble against the Valiant. Let's give them the Valiant, which, you know, it's part of the strategy, so I can't complain about that. I think it's interesting, and I think it's fun. And Paris versus Atlanta, I think this is going to be close. Now, here's why. I think I'm a little worried about Paris in this. I think they're really good, but they're really young, and they don't tend to run wacky stuff, even if they have to. But Atlanta is not afraid to try different stuff, and I don't know how Paris is going to handle being out of a set meta kind of situation right now. I do think Paris is going to win, but I think it's going to be a close 3-1, maybe a 3-2, and they're going to edge out Atlanta, but Atlanta's going to show up for sure because they looked decent enough today. Dogman actually was fantastic. This was the best match he played all year long, and he picked the perfect time to do it. So if he is on his game like he was today, that bodes well for Atlanta. But I still think Paris has a little bit more in the tank to take them, even though Atlanta runs some different strats and things like that. I think Paris might struggle a little bit getting guys on picks that work really well for them. But there's certain guys I'm not worried about, like Hanbin. I think he'll be fine. You could run a rush comp with Ben Best because he's got the Rhine already. He's good at Rhine and that kind of thing. But on the whole, I like them. Now the last match, the Valiant fell to Florida, and I'm not excited about this at all. If you guys know, the two teams I worried about, one's eliminated, Houston, which I don't know why I was worried about them now after watching them play Boston. But the Valiant are give the Mayhem fits. They've beaten them twice or 3 times now that they played them. Once in a tournament. So I'm a little concerned for the Mayhem. I think the Valiant can run a variety of different things. And the Mayhem are kind of handcuffed. Now, guys, if you look at it, yes, they have really good players. Now, one of the things that concerns me about the Mayhem is you just have BQB and Yaki. You don't have any backup DPS player. You have 3 tanks, and your one tank is essentially a Reinhardt Goats one trick in Karayan, which leaves you with Fate and Gargoyle. Gargoyle has a monstrous Roadhog. But what are we going to run other than we? Trying to be objective. What are the Mayhem going to be running other than, like, if they run Roadhog? So you got Fate. He can run Ball. He can run Winston. So you might see some dive stuff come in from them, but where it could get tricky is if the Valiant run one of these comps with Zarya Roadhog and you need to counter it or mirror it or something like that. You don't necessarily have the players. They have, I think, 3 supports and 3 tanks and then 2 DPS. So I'm a little concerned as to what's going to happen here. I'm taking the Mayhem because I'm riding them all the way through. But the Valiant scare me a lot. I think the Valiant have a very good shot at moving on into the next round of the playoffs and sending Florida into the losers bracket. But I'm ultimately taking Florida no matter what I say about the Valiant. I think the Valiant are good. And you could tell Albert on the selection show for Florida wasn't exactly thrilled getting stuck with the Valiant because they do give the Mayhem a lot of trouble. And reasonably so. And the Mayhem have something to prove against the Valiant. Me and a lot of other people say that the Mayhem are better than the Valiant, but the Valiant beat them every time they play them. So they really need to step up and beat the Valiant here. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the episode and are enjoying the playoffs. They're already providing me very entertaining, a lot of cool comps and different things going on. And it's going to be exciting all the way through. I can feel it. It's just, even the matches that were quote-unquote bad, there still were good storylines in there, like Washington and Boston doing what they did. But now we're into double elimination land. We're getting further and further in, and it's getting more and more tense as we get along for these teams. So hopefully the rest of the weekend turns out like the last couple days. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Everybody in YouTube, thank you for all your support. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Everybody in podcast land, same to you guys. Thank you very much. And don't forget, we will have a recap of Saturday and Sunday up on Monday, somewhere in the afternoon, early evening, probably. Until then, guys, this is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe. Have a good rest of your day. And I'll talk to you in the next one.